We found an article online talking about how nonprofit wages are unsustainably low for those of us who actually live the mission. Let's talk about it.
We're Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit coaches. A better world needs healthier nonprofits. And on this channel, our focus is showing how leaders can do better and be better.
So let's just jump right into this article. It's actually a Reddit post, but it's written more like an article. It says, nonprofit wages are unsustainably low for those of us who actually live the mission. If you work for a nonprofit, you know that you're probably more likely than not, just statistically, earning less for a job that you might take in the for-profit world. And there are a lot of different reasons why that might be the case, but this is a really interesting conversation to break down, and maybe we can pinpoint a few things that nonprofits could do better, and maybe pinpoint a few things that just mindset shifts need to happen for us as well.
Right. This is something that is pervasive across the nonprofit industry. Or maybe sector is a better word. But it is something that we hear about a lot. And there are some nonprofits that actually pay competitively with their for-profit counterparts. And I think that this is something that is starting to shift. But it's becoming more and more of an issue, especially as people are starting to realize, yes, I can live the mission, or I could go get a job that pays better and then donate to the mission. And there's kind of this tug of war happening where for a lot of times it was like, if I can get a job at a nonprofit, I'm willing to take less because I would rather do work that I feel fulfilled doing, that I feel like is making a difference. And this other side of it, where now there's this interesting shift where I think people are starting to want to just get a job where they're not having to carry their work home with them at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I could have a job that, yeah, my work doesn't have like the mission I want, but at the end of the day, I can go home and just be with my family. I get paid better, and then I can actually give to that mission I care about. And now instead of being told I'm not doing enough, I need to work 50 hours or 60 hours or 70 hours, or I need to increase everything I'm doing, instead I can give a little bit of money every month and get applauded by the org leaders, and suddenly I'm their best friend. It's this interesting thing that's causing tension within the nonprofit space for people who aren't being paid competitively.
So let's jump into the article. I'm just going to read a little bit and we'll chat. I work for a large nonprofit that specializes in helping people with disabilities find and maintain employment. I'm a job coach, and my job involves going out to see 15 plus clients every single week. Struggling to find a place to live within the city that I work that doesn't cost me more than half of my income. Oof. To put this into context, I have clients with no formal education who make more than I do. So this person works in a nonprofit, helping people with disabilities find employment, and they're helping these people find jobs that are way better paying than hers. And so she's like, why is there such a disparity here?
Yeah, that is a hard place to be. I know at different points in our lives, we've worked within different nonprofits, contracted with different nonprofits, worked from the outside on different nonprofits. And it's interesting to see how the inner workings of nonprofits happen. And there is a certain point where people who are working in the nonprofit start to look outside and they're like, this doesn't make sense. Like, you can applaud me all you want for living the mission, but there's a gap here. And I think that that's what this person is starting to see, because I doubt they have an issue with the people that they're helping getting good paying jobs.
No,
she's not going like,
they're doing
I do
not
not want to help you get paid more than me. But instead, it's just begging the question, wait, if I can coach them well enough to get their pay increase to be above mine, wouldn't that mean that my skills should be worth more than they're currently being paid? And she goes on, today we had a team meeting where a bunch of directors and upper management danced in their chairs and congratulated us on living our mission. They talked about reorganizing and showed off expensive corporate training programs. It suddenly struck me that every single one of those people makes several times what I make per hour. None of them are crying at the end of the night trying to figure out how to pay for rent, groceries, car repairs. They make us drive our personal vehicles. And yes, there's mileage reimbursement that's supposed to cover wear and tear, but it doesn't. And that's pretty common. Mileage reimbursement usually will cover gas and maybe a little bit extra. But at the end of the day, it's not often going to cover if you actually have to go get the brakes done on your car or you have an actual issue that has come up. This is something that we see a lot, though, where upper people in nonprofits, when they look at other people's pay and someone comes to them and says, I'm really struggling with this amount of money. I need to be paid more, or this isn't working. Instead of addressing the issue, they will focus on, but the mission matters. But the mission is important. But the mission. And I understand this on one side. Like, I know that there are times in my life where I have taken something that pays less in order to do something that I care about more. On the flip side of it, though, it does show that the directors in upper management might not be in tune with what's actually going on in the lives of the people. Like, they see the dollar amount, they see the mission, but they're not seeing this person who's actually stressed at the end of the night trying to figure out, how am I supposed to live, though? Like, that's a hard place to
And
be.
usually the focus is on like, well, maybe there are ways that you can save money or something like that. And I don't think there's a problem with executives earning more than people who work in the nonprofit. I think executives of any business or any nonprofit should be paid more, especially if they're doing a good job, because you want them to stay. You don't want them to say, you know what, it's just not worth it. This is really, really tough work. And I'm like, I could go and get a job as a corporate CEO and make way, way, way more money. There's a fantastic TED Talk about this that we should totally review at some point and just talk about. But it's a cultural thing too, where people who donate to nonprofits expect that the overhead is going to be extremely low. So then that forces all sorts of weird things to happen inside of the nonprofit. If the overhead is really, really low, but the nonprofit wants to have a bunch of employees, guess what? They're just going to pay them all a lot less.
Yeah. And this is something that is kind of a weird dynamic here, because even though there's this idea that nonprofits should have really low overhead, I'm not saying should, but culturally should have low overhead. A lot of times, in order to have those executive directors and some of the higher levels, especially for a large nonprofit, they might be making more than the people who are working within the nonprofit. They're also taking a substantial pay cut generally from what they could be making in the for-profit sector.
Right.
I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I am saying that this is the other factor that can be difficult to see, because just like that executive director would be making much more in the for-profit sector, multiple times over what someone in the company might be making, that same thing kind of translates into the nonprofit area. And this is a fine line that nonprofits have to balance. And part of this is being in tune with the people in the organization and how you're communicating value and how you're talking about what they're doing and the work that's happening. So this person says, I was always taught that wages should be commensurate. Is that how you say that? Yes. Wages should line up with the value that you bring the organization. We're an organization that is devoted to improving employment opportunities for people who have disabilities. So why is it that the people who are living and breathing the mission every day by working on hands-on with our clients are the ones who are the least paid? This question makes sense from this person's point of view. On the other side of it, there's also the struggle where the value that the executive director and the upper management is bringing to the organization probably comes more in the form of network connections, fundraising, being able to manage large amounts of people. So there are a lot of things at play here.
I would say too,
it causes conflict.
A big piece of being in an executive or administrative role in a larger nonprofit is you're basically a salesperson the entire time. You're constantly trying to figure out how can we keep donors on board, keep them like giving and keeping people volunteering and all of that stuff. So you're basically having to be a salesperson. And if you've ever worked in a for-profit business where there's a sales team, you know that they're the best paid.
Yeah.
The sales team makes the money because they make the thing work. So they're the ones who are bringing in the funds to be able to pay you at all. And so you got to take that into account partly too. But I think a really big issue that happens with nonprofits is they overextend themselves because of the fact that they have a mission, which is basically an unpaid benefit that they can give to their employees. They say, well, hey, you know what? You're getting this much per hour, plus you get to live the mission. So therefore it equals a better salary. And unfortunately, mission doesn't pay the bills for people. And so then you have to ask the question, is the mission worth this for me? And if it isn't, then find a different place to work.
Right. And I think part of this is people higher up in the organization that are saying this. A lot of times they don't know what other fuel to be burning in order to actually give value to the employees. If they're like, I cannot actually pay more, so I'm just going to focus on living the mission. Maybe that was a phrase that worked as the org was getting started and it's become redundant, but they don't know where else to go from there. They don't know how to add value in other areas, or say something that feels more actually pertinent to this person. The problem with the idea of living the mission is one person might value living the mission at $30 an hour. It's like, I will take that much of a pay cut to be able to do this.
Yep.
Someone else might say living the mission is 50 cents an hour and I want to get paid more. It's not
Right.
something that's clear, and you can't just say that it is a value or a benefit when there are possibly people within your organization that don't see it as a value or a benefit. I hope that people working in nonprofit truly care about that cause, but there are going to be people who look at it and say, yeah, I'm happy to be doing something that's helping people, but I don't know that it's worth this price difference for me personally. And that's okay.
Yeah. And so I think really what needs to happen is, people who are in this position need to say, you know what, you need to pay me more or I'm going to be done working here. And like culturally, the more that happens, the more nonprofits, guess what? They're going to start paying their people more. But as long as people put up with it because they're like, well, I'm living the mission. It's a supply and demand. It's like basic economics and basic capitalism when there's money being exchanged for goods and services, that if they're going to get it for the lowest price, they can get it. And if you're willing to take it, that's what you're going to get. Like, that's just how it works. So the only way that this changes is if employees say across the board, hey, we need to get paid more or we're not going to work with this nonprofit, then that puts the nonprofit in a position. If we want this position, we have to pay more for it.
Right.
And then things change.
And we're starting to see things where pay is starting to shift into something that is more sustainable for families and for individuals. Now, I do want to give one piece of advice for this nonprofit that could actually solve a lot of the problems. And here it is. Instead of having individuals who are on staff working with all of your clients one-on-one, it would be worth looking into bringing in volunteers who can work with 2 or 3 clients a week each. And instead of having that be a staff role, turn that into a leadership role where that person can be focused on coaching the coaches. Now, the benefit here is that person is not going to be doing wear and tear on their car. They're going to be able to just be in one location and be able to focus on working with maybe 15 people, but it's 15 people who are all coaches. Those coaches, each having, let's say, 3 clients that they're working with, actually increases your organization's impact and the ability to work with more individuals. So instead of one person working with 15, you could have one person overseeing a team that's working with 45 plus. This will make it so you can actually increase your funding, have better numbers to bring to your donors, and actually pay that leader more because more work is happening for your organization.
And then the expectations are extremely clear. This is a volunteer role. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But this you're signing up to live the mission and not get paid for it. And that's and if someone's like, "Hey, I'll do that." Perfect. Some people are looking for ways to do their work that they do in the for-profit world pro bono. Some people are looking for volunteer opportunities. And so in a way, what you're doing is you're actually just making the expectations far more clear. This is a staff role. This is a role that's going to get paid a sustainable wage. But when it comes to these parts of the organization, this is going to be volunteer, and people who sign up for it say, I don't expect any kind of payment. I'm going to do this just out of the goodness of my heart because that's what I want to do. And then those two things are separated. When you try to lean too heavily on living the mission in the staff roles, what that means is people are inevitably going to be getting paid a lot less. And for some people, that's going to weigh on them very heavily and possibly create some real issues for their life.
Now, if you found this interesting, we have another video where we talk about the article that says the Catholic Church is the original pyramid scheme.
We'll see you over there.